guys, my name is Marta, welcome to my channel, and today I'm going to be going through all the classics that I read this summer. All of the classics I read are either English or French, and they are mostly texts from the 19th century, though I have one that is from the Renaissance period. So stay tuned if you want to see what I thought of each of them. I will be putting timestamps on the description of the video in case you want to skip through and only hear my thoughts on one or two of these texts. And now, without further ado, let's get to the books. The first classic I read is a very popular 19th century French novel, and it is Madame Bovary by Gustave Flaubert. This is the very popular story of Emma Bovary, who after growing up in this convent marries a man that, though initially looks promising, she ends up getting bored enough, and in order to satisfy her romantic needs, he starts looking for other men to meet outside of her marriage. It's, as Anna Karenina and many other novels from the 19th century, a text that talks a lot about marriage expectations, and about the position of women inside a marriage, and as well as many novels such as the one that I have just mentioned. Is a novel where infidelity is the main focus of the story. One of the most interesting things about the book is the character of Emma Bovary and how she is developed through the story. She has some sort of Don Quixote complex, since because of her wide reading of romance novels, she has very high expectations for men, and that is the reason why she is not satisfied with any of the men she meets throughout the novel. It's a book that talks about bourgeois society and about how women were inside of that society. It's a book that was not very well perceived when it came out because of the subject matter, and it's a book that was very influential for many other authors of this century. The book is also known for its tragic ending, which I think is not a spoiler if I mention it here, but in case people do not know how this story ends, just go into it knowing that the ending is pretty tragic and maybe powerful if you have been told how it ends. But in my case, I studied this book in high school. I did a project on it comparing it to Anna Karenina and a Spanish book on the same topic, and I personally wasn't shocked. However, when it comes to my personal thoughts on the book, despite me acknowledging how great it is, how well written it is, and how important it is as a text, I personally did not vibe with it. I'm starting to think that Flaubert may, as an author, not be for me, since I also read a short story by him and I did not like it, and something about the way he told the story was the thing that put me off while reading it. It's a book that took me a while to read, and it is not too long. I mean, it has 300 and something pages, almost 400, but for a classic it is not long. But yeah, I personally did not really vibe with it. I gave it 3.5 stars, and I know lots of people love it, but I also know that it's normal for people to dislike it, and most of the times it's because of the same reason as mine. I think it's pretty slow, and I also did not really vibe with Emma Bovary as a character, even though I can understand her. All of us readers read about these beautiful relationships in novels and then want that in real life. But yeah, Emma Bovary, you might be someone easy to understand and identify with, but your story was not my personal favorite. Going on a complete different line, but staying in 19th century France, I also read Maupassant, Boule de Suif. This Maupassant is one of my all-time favorite French classic authors, and this is his most famous, I think, short story collection. It's a collection of short stories set during the Franco-Prussian War, and in which we can find from satires to sad stories to others that will make you laugh. it's a book that I do not exactly know how to review since they are short stories, but I personally love Maupassant's writing style. I find it very accessible and easy to read, and I always have a great time when I read him. So yeah, really enjoyed it. It's a collection of stories pretty different from what he's most well known for, which are his psychological horror stories in the lines of his very famous Leola. But yeah, this one was still great. I really enjoyed it. It reminded me of his novel Bellamy, which I read at the end of last year and became an instant favorite. So yeah, if you like 19th century short stories, I highly recommend Maupassant, not only just this collection but all of his works. Now going to England, I read The Warden by Anthony Trollope. This was my first ever Trollope, and I think is also his first story in the Barchester Tower series. I know he has 2 series and I always mix them up in my head, so I don't know if this one is from the Barchester Towers one or the other one. But anyway, in this book we follow a warden and how all of the members of the church in this small community get accused of being paid way more than they deserve. And the one person that is the most blamed for this is the warden or main character. It's a very short book that I found very easy to read. I really vibe with Trollope's writing style. I like how he spoke to the reader in a very funny way, and I also like how he depicted the picture of a small society in which you can see how it's the people who are claiming the church to stop profiting from them. But besides the satirical part, which is something that I always tend to enjoy in my stories, I also really enjoy the warden as a character. He seemed very innocent, and I found the book to be an example of a case of someone who has power but doesn't know why he has it. And I think that is something that I have never before seen explored in a book, and I found it really nice and really interesting. I also really enjoy the rest of the characters in the story. I like the background romance that we got, and I overall really enjoy the story, really enjoy the characters, and really enjoy the atmosphere of this small community. So I am excited to continue on with this series. I will hopefully be reading another Trollope before the year ends, but do not quote me on that because I do not know. I do not own the next book in the series, and I don't know if I want to buy it now or wait until next year. But yeah, I will for sure continue reading some Trollope. Super glad I finally got to this Victorian author that I had been meaning to read for the longest time, because he's been compared to Charles Dickens, and personally I really like Dickens, so I could not understand why I hadn't read him yet. Next we have Thomas Hardy's Tess of the D'Urbervilles, a book that I think I was disappointed by because I did not read it at the right time. I just remember that I forgot to give star ratings, but for Boule de Suif I gave 4 stars, and The Warden I gave 3.5 stars. And Madame Bovary, I think I've already said that, but I gave it 3 stars. Tess of the D'Urbervilles by Thomas Hardy, as I was saying, I gave it 3.5 stars, but I just said I think it was a case of me, not the book, because I read it in a moment when I wanted to read a classic but didn't know what to pick up, so I just said let's go with Tess, it's popular, people love it, so there's nothing to lose. But sadly there was something to lose. It tells, in case you don't know what Tess is about, it's the story of Tess D'Urberville, who goes to work to this farm of these very rich people who are the D'Urbervilles, a family with which she's supposed to have some bloodline connection, since their last names are pretty much the same. And it's a very tragic story of this character Tess, who after working there goes back home, then goes to work with another family, with another people, then gets married, and her entire life story is just tragic. It's a book that discusses very serious topics that weren't talked much about in this time period, such as sexual assault, and I think that it's a book that really shows a 19th century woman in a very complex and serious way. It's also a book that is filled with nature descriptions. Hardy describes the English countryside in a magnificent way. So if you like books that are set in nature, in the countryside, you will most likely like this. It's a book that also deals with usual classical text topics such as marriage and its complexities. It's a book about love, about sadness, about faith in a way. It's a book that is very tragic, and its tragic atmosphere can be seen from the very beginning. There are quotes that talk about it from the very first pages, such as the one where Tess describes her work as a blighted one, which is a scene that happens within the first pages and that already announces the hardships that he will have to go through during her life. It's a hard to read book and a story that I personally did not vibe with very much. I don't know why. I was expecting to love it, but despite its greatness, I personally did not really vibe with this. I don't know if it was Hardy's writing style. I don't know if it is that I just don't vibe with this type of writing style, this type of story set in nature. I don't think I have ever read any other naturesque classic. Well, I have read some George Sand, but she's French, she's different, and I love her. But I don't know. I don't think I have. So yeah, maybe it's just me not liking this type of books. Who knows? Besides that, I will give Hardy another chance. I am intrigued by lots of his other novels, but after reading Tess, I'm not really vibing with it. I don't know if right now I'm in the time of my life where his works are for me and my reading taste. Next we have my Renaissance novel, the French classic Heptameron by Marguerite de Navarre. This is what I would call the French version of the Boccaccio's Decameron, but written by a woman and dealing with concepts from a more feminine perspective. As Boccaccio's novel or collection of short stories, however you want to talk about it, the book is a collection of, I think, 71 or 72, I want to say the number, of 72 short stories dealing with concepts such as love, religion, marriage, and a bit of social critique here and there, a bit of satirical stories here and there. Really fun, some of them, really repetitive, some others. When it comes to short story collections and when it comes to really old ones, and I haven't read Boccaccio, but this is what puts me off reading the Decameron, is that they are going to be repetitive. If we have 72 stories, most of them are going to feature similar characters. I mean, it's a Renaissance text. There wasn't a big variety of ways and things to talk about. So there is a moment when you are reading this where you just want it to end, because most of the stories are the same. Most of the stories talk about religion as this salvation thing, but some others criticize marriage, some others criticize, some others talk about infidelity. There is this huge debate between whether women are good or bad, or whether it's men who are bad. It's a book that discusses themes that might be interesting, but that I personally, as someone who doesn't really like ancient text, did not really vibe with. I did appreciate it for what it was, but I think it's best to, one, either read it over a broader period of time than I did, and I did read it for 2 months and a half, or just pick it up, let it down, put it down, pick it up throughout years, because the stories are going to get repetitive, as I said. And yeah, but despite that, the writing style was, for it to be written in Renaissance French, accessible, and so were the stories. There weren't weird concepts difficult to understand if you don't know the time period. Personally, I would recommend it if you are interested in Renaissance literature. I think it's more interesting to read that than Boccaccio's Decameron, since it's written by a woman. But yeah, who am I to say that? I haven't read Boccaccio. And for the last two books, first we have, I think, my favorite one of all the classics I read, which is Émile Zola's Thérèse Raquin. This was my first Émile Zola and I adored it. Not only the story, but also his way of telling it. If you don't know why this novel is about, it follows Thérèse Raquin, who marries her cousin, a very ill, sickly man. And when they move to Paris and she gets to meet this other man, they both make the evil plan to kill Thérèse's husband and be together. As you can say, it's a very twisted story that is very easy to read, very fun to read, and that features a magnificent psychological portrayal of two characters who do something that is pretty evil and that afterwards feel the repercussions of in their own head. You can really see throughout the pages how these two characters start to get haunted by what they have done. There is a point where they claim to feel the presence of the dead man's spirit, and their own relationship starts to drift apart after the murder takes place. It's a book, as I said, that is very twisted, that really shows the repercussions of guilt, and that personally reminded me a bit of Maupassant's Zola because of how they start acting when they start to become crazy. It's a really good book. It's a really good and accessible classic that I think people who do not usually like classics could even enjoy. It's a dark and twisted story that also features this old lady who is Thérèse's aunt and who was the dead man's mother, who, as the story progresses, starts getting older and sicker. And there is this scene where he is trying to say that these two characters murdered her son, and it's a scene that while I was reading it, I could not stop. I was shocked. I was on the edge of my seat. I adored it. I loved every single moment of me reading it, and I am super excited now to read more of Zola's works. I had always had this expectation that I would like his writing style, but after reading some 19th century text and not really vibing with them, I was starting to think that my love for 19th century literature was going away. But apparently it's not. Apparently it's just a few authors. I absolutely love Zola's writing style, and I cannot wait to read more from him in the very near future. And I gave it, of course, I don't know if I gave it 5 stars, but if I didn't, I am going to raise the 4 stars that might be on my Goodreads to 5. And last book I read is a very popular summery classic, and it is A Room with a View by E.M. Forster. This is my second Forster. I read Memories last year and did not really enjoy it. I liked it, but I did not vibe with Forster's writing style, which is why going into it I was a bit hesitant. But I did have a complete different experience with this one. From the very beginning, I really enjoyed Forster's writing. I found it to be way more humorous, way more satirical, and way closer to the reader than I found it to be in Morris. And the story overall was more enjoyable to my taste. If you don't know what it is about, it follows Lucy Honeychurch, who goes with her cousin to Florence and gets the room she didn't want because she wanted a room with a view. So after meeting this man and his son, they exchange rooms, and that is how the story begins. It's a travel story in which we go from Florence to Rome and then back to their house in England. It's a book that compares and contrasts how a woman was treated when at home versus outside home. It's a book that talks about the liberties of travel and how that helps someone develop as a person. It's a book that really screams female rights. It's a book with great characters. Lucy as a character was fantastic. I really liked her way of seeing the world and her way of speaking for herself. And I also really like the male characters in general. I really like the Emersons. They were really funny, and their positive view of life was also very enlightening to see. I really enjoyed the book as a whole. I really liked its humor, as I said, and I also really liked its focus on love and on following one's dreams. I really liked how it criticized the Victorian society of the time, and I really liked the Italian atmosphere of this section when they were in Italy. It's a book that I highly recommend for someone who is starting to get into classics because it's very accessible, and it's a book that is overall really funny and really easy to read. But despite all of those positives, I have one negative thing to say about it, and it's that it was very predictable. From the very beginning, you know how it's going to end, and it ended like I expected. I know most Victorian novels are pretty cliché, but personally, that was a drawback of this book. But overall, I really liked it. I gave it 3.5, 4 stars, something between that. I still have to think about it. But yeah, a great classic, a great fun summery read, and one that I really recommend. It's filled with fun scenes, it's filled with pretty quotes, it's filled with inspiration, and it's overall a book that will make you feel a lot of different things. So that was all for today. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, give it a thumbs up and comment down below if you've read any of these classics and what are your thoughts of them. Also comment down below what classics you've read this summer, if you've read any, and subscribe to my channel if you want to see more from me. And I hope you're doing amazing, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!